afternoon on the Empty Skull Ranch. Today we got a treat for you. I know this looks like a regular dusty old bone, but we're going to get into that in 1 second. All right. All right. And here we are on the ranch, like I said, with a real treat. I personally love these old bones, these old historic guns. Um, Everyone has a story behind it. I know I always say that in these videos, but it's true. They all do have some kind of a story behind them. So right here, I have not a Russian one, it's the Finnish M91, or otherwise referred to as the M24, or the M91-24, Finnish Mosin nagant. So basically, this guy is kind of an interesting example of that rifle, because as you probably know, some of you Mosin enthusiasts out there, that these guys were kind of the first step in the Finnish pioneering into their own weapon system, their own unique weapon system. After the Finland declared their independence in 1917, and kind of hashed out a little bit of a civil war there, which went up until about 1918, and against the red Finns and the white Finns, and a little bit of up and down there and all around, and then finally at the conclusion of it, the white Finns won. The red Finns were communists, and they were still pro-communism, left over from Russia's stronghold on them, and how they had to endure years and years of rulership underneath Russia, and some of them, it's almost like some kind of form of Stockholm syndrome, they getting to be comfortable with what your captors were doing with you. Anyway, the white Finns ended up on top, and then kind of was the birth of the Finnish army, and they also had a civil defense unit, and SKY marked Mosins are distinctly for that civil defense. So actually, the Finnish army and the civil defense were responsible for procuring their own weapons at this time, during the early stages. So what did they have a lot of? Well, they had a lot of Russian M91 Mosins hanging around. So about 190,000 of them to be exact, or ballpark, but about 190,000 of these guys lying around that they were looking at, and then they had some Mausers and some other things kind of kicking around too, so that's but anyway, they had way more of these, so they figured, well, you know what, let's use what we got and make it better. So at first they kind of looked at them and they said, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If they had good barrels still, and kind of frugal, but also Finns have a keen eye for marksmanship. That's why it was so important to us to make sure that these guys got refurbished in a way that was conducive to marksmanship. That way you'd have a reliable kind of tool on your hands in the event of having to go into battle and all that. They wanted to make sure that you had a weapon that was reliable, but yet you could put the rounds right where you needed to when you pulled that trigger. So this guy, to all appearances, kind of looks like a typical Russian M91. Keep in mind, it's not the 9130 yet, because we had not quite gotten to 1930 yet. So this is back in 1918 and going into the 20s. So this guy was the M24. Basically kept a little bit of the Russian stuff. They changed out the stocks on the ones that needed it. And I'll show you in a little bit what constitutes a Finnish stock over a Russian stock. And when they needed it, rebarreled them when they needed to. They kind of reached out to a couple different places to get their barrels from, Swiss barrels made by SIG were kind of the go-to. They also had some Italian process that would re-sleeve old barrels. It was kind of a crude system that kind of worked and it didn't work, and they stubbornly tried to make it work for a little bit. But to find a Mosin with one of those barrels, it's, I would assume, is pretty rare. And I haven't seen one personally in a gun shop myself. I mean, that's one of those things that you'd probably see pictures of before you saw one actually in a gun shop. But this guy definitely caught my eye in a gun shop. And while we're in the topic of gun shops, might as well give a quick shout out to our friends at Monadnock Firearms, located in Fitzwilliam, New Hampshire. They have a vast array of newer weapons. They get some interesting old weapons. You never know what they're going to have in that store, but it's a terrific little place. I highly recommend them. The staff there is knowledgeable. They're approachable. They love what they're doing. They're all about firearms. Each one of them is an avid shooter. They if you're new to shooting, they can point you in the right direction, kind of show you what would be ideal. And if you're a seasoned shooter, they got that stuff too. And so Navnock Firearms, can't say enough good about them. This was actually I had told them some time ago, that I was looking for early Finnish Mosins, and if they ever got any, that would be swell. So something told me to pull in there that day, and when I did, they had just gotten these things in, like literally just gotten these things in. They had 3 of them on the shelf. So I went in there and I was wondering why the guy behind the counter kind of had this grin on his face, and realized once I saw these guys and he came up to me, he said, I was counting the seconds to see how long it took you to see the Finnish Mosins. So that was a true little treat. And of course I couldn't leave without one. Absolutely couldn't leave without one of these guys. Stickled pink. They had, each one of them had a little story. They came from a local collector who was needed to liquidate a couple of his pieces, and kept all of his stuff in really good condition. And as I could tell by the condition of these guys, he had one that had a really, really nice stock that was in this configuration. Didn't even look like it had been used. And then there was another one that was a slightly different variant, but it was also in this type of phase, so to speak, as these guys were kind of improving. So it took me a little bit to look amongst them, and then when I saw this guy, I knew this one had to be it. So anyway, can't say enough good about Monadnock Firearms. Terrific people, terrific shop. It's convenient. They're like I said, they're knowledgeable. They love what they're doing. I recommend them highly. So anyway, delving back into this guy, I'll show you a couple of these markings as to why I picked this particular rifle. So let me come out, get a little closer to you guys here. Alrighty, get this guy in focus. As you can notice here, it is an M24. Looking at it, yep. But the nose, it's got the typical early style sights with no shroud, and it's got your Arshan style Russian sight on it, which the Arshans had been scrubbed out on the back there, slash mark through the Arshans, and then the meters added to this side right there. Also a Finnish improvement, this extra little notch cut in for the 200 yard, well, 200 meter, we're talking meters, but that wasn't there. That was normally just the end of it where you would end. And of course it still has the volley markings on the underneath side of it, but that's rarely used. So anyway, that is where this guy parks, right there on the 200. So also what caught my eye about this guy is, well, obviously these sling swivels. When you see these sling swivels, you know you're dealing with a Finnish Mosin. The Finns definitely they like to make things a little bit better, a little bit more reliable, a little bit more foolproof. So the leather dog collars that the Russian models had, they didn't really like those. I mean, we're in cases, you'll find them with the leather ones, but when they had brought these in for improvements, this is one of the first things that they changed, is put these metal sling swivels onto them. Even carried over with to the ones that had the Finnish stock that was in the format of the Russian stock. And as you can see by this splice down here, try to bring it into focus, but that is a Finnish stock because it's got the stock splice in it. And you can tell it's a wartime, and now I'm going to get to that part, because you're thinking to yourself, M24 wartime rifle? Yep, this was a 1941 reissue of the M24. So as you can see, the stock splice right here has the rounded fingers. The rounded fingers that they would that was a wartime splice. And then after war, they would have gone to a more square type of finger system, kind of like what you see in furniture when they do splices in furniture. Kind of has that squared off and then they're pressed together and glued. But the wartime stocks had the rounded fingers. Notice all these little bumps and dings. Like I said, they had another one that had a beautiful, pristine stock on it. But I'm a sucker for character. I love the character of the battle rifles. So basically, and also one more thing to show you, in 1942, they had a division known as the puolistuslaitos, which is a kind of defense department, and it was only really around for 2 months. And so you can kind of see why, you know, these are harder to come by, these M24s that were put together during the war effort. But there it is. It has the marking. Check out that alphabet of a word. Goes side to side. Tongue twister. Puolistuslaitos. So it's on a Tikkakoski barrel. So a Tikka barrel. That's they make wonderful hunting rifles and all that nowadays, but back then that was one of the avenues that they went for barrels on these guys, was Tikkakoski. So this guy is a special little guy right here. And also, excuse me, you'll notice the Russian Imperial Eagle still on this hex receiver. That's not something very common you'll find on a Finnish Mosin, because a lot of times these eagles were scrubbed out, so this looks like a little dimple. So M39s that you get a lot of times, most always, this will be a little dimple because they scrubbed out that Russian Imperial Eagle. And also, it has the marking for the Finnish Army. So SA, Suomen Armeija. So Finns obviously were very, very big on using what they had. So this was after the puolistuslaitos was kind of absorbed. It was obviously put into use as a regular Finnish Army rifle. But the cool thing about it was this was a wartime rifle in this platform. So because the demand for M39s on the front lines was increasing, and they had so they were churning out about as many of those M39s as they could. So then they had to kind of think to themselves, well, how can we get rifles to our men? Well, the earlier stages of these guys were a little bit easier because they still had a lot of these. Keep in mind, they had 190,000 Russian Mosins hanging around, and they also did business with a lot of other countries prior to the wartime and all that, to procure more Mosin nagants so that they could fashion them. So about 170, 175,000 more were traded, either using just however means, traded, paid for, bought. It was but they had settled on the Mosin pattern. And like I said, the civil defense and the Finnish army were separate entities towards the beginning, and by the time the war was over, they were all just Finnish army instead of the civil defense rifles are marked with a big pronounced SKY. So that's I think it was like Suojeluskuntus. That was the what the SKY stood for. So civil defense. And so Finn language is kind of a tongue twister, I know. And the other cool thing about this sling that I wanted to point it out, that I wanted to pointed stick. Anyway, what I wanted to point out to you guys was this sling right here. Also, I don't know how well it comes up on camera, but the SA is still on the sling. So this is a original Finnish Army sling that this rifle retains. kind of a cool thing, you know. I like all those little details, and the fact that this guy is kind of a cool example of it. It has the PL marking on it, the puolistuslaitos marking. It has the force match bolt too. The all these numbers match, so that's also a cool thing. And it's got the sling. I couldn't say no to it. Could not say no to it. These guys are getting a little bit more pricey this day and age, and I know even the Russian ones are. I mean, hard to believe back in the old days when you could get them for 85 bucks, 100 bucks, maybe, 120 was starting to get a little steep. But nowadays, you can't even find a hex receiver Mosin and expect to pay less than 300 bucks for the thing, and even 400. I don't even know like the most recent market analysis prices on the Russian guys, but I know these Finn ones have always been a little bit more pricey, and for good reason. Finns definitely worked these things over, overhauled them, made them better. And even this particular model, some of the improvements are not visible. Obviously there are some of these improvements lie in this magazine here. The follower, I believe, was the spring on the follower was a little bit more reliable, kind of held the rounds up a little bit better so that we didn't get rim lock and jams as often in this trigger. In some cases, they have a little bit of a coil to take the slop out of it, a little bit of a coil spring in there. This one, however, does not have that, but despite that, once you actually do lay your finger on that and pull it back, boy, it's got a very nice, crisp break on it. So, I mean, basically, this one being a thick Kokoski barrel, it's obviously not a SIG barrel, but as far as the SIG barrels go, there was also German barrels that the marking would lie on the other side of this barrel. What's underneath, pressed up against the wood, would be the German markings. It's a Bowler Schultz or something. Bowler, that Bohler. You'll notice that marking on the underside of that barrel. But a lot of them too, with the SIG barrels, first 3,000 SIG barrels produced were on the profile of the Russian M91 barrel. And so after the initial order for 3,000 of them, they started producing fins, obviously, again with the marksmanship, but wanted something that was going to be a little bit more accurate. So they started producing heavy barrels for these. So you'll notice the heavy barrel version of these guys has a stepped type of look to the end of it. And the reason why they stepped it on the end rather than leaving it a whole heavy barrel, which I mean would have made sense, but practical Finns wanted to be able to still retain use of the bayonet, and these were for the M91 and fit this barrel profile. So they wanted to continue using this bayonet. So that's why they wanted the heavy barrel, but be able to use the bayonet at the same time. So figure, well, make the barrel heavy all the way through till the end where you need this. So, but afterwards, through some of the other models, they reworked them and all that, and then they came up with their own style bayonets, got rid of the rat tail bayonet and went to a more knife-like bayonet, which are hard as hen's teeth to actually find one. I would love to get my hands on one of those, but we do have a forge on the ranch, and maybe I smell a video coming up where we make a Finnish style bayonet. That'd be kind of anyway, yeah, maybe that'll be a video coming up. I'd like the challenge. It would be interesting. But anyway, so we're going to put this guy on the table and start taking it apart. But just a moment to kind of holding this guy, makes you wonder what it would have been like kind of carrying one of these guys, walking through on patrol, and even just in the heat of battle, something with a barrel this long. And I mean, these were true battle rifles. They talk about weapons of war being AR-15s and stuff like that. I mean, yes, that is a weapon of war, like in its full automatic version and all that, which these guys seem to get it twisted all the time. They call it weapons of war, but it's a semi-automatic rifle. But I don't want to start getting going on one of those tangents where I get myself all worked up. And but want to talk about battle weapons. This guy right here, this is a battle weapon. This is something that somebody fighting for their country's freedom, fighting for their independence, fighting for, would have carried something like this, 5 rounds in the magazine, and just giving it hell and when you run out of ammo, give them the bayonet. I mean, that's doesn't get any more true grit and battle weapon than that, does it? So, kind of picturing what that would be like, you know, just probably walking along and humming Sekijärven polka and ryssät voi perkele! Rupesi mene nytten! Ei ne pirut olisi. Viime yönä ei se ollut. Miksi? Mistä ne tuli? Mene helvettiin! Nytten ne tulee! Ampua nytten! Säästä se linja! Kuole paskaa! Kinen, panokset loppu. Jos siellä ruumit on, enempi panoksia voi olla. Älä mennä. Koitetaan. Mene nyt takaisin helvettiin! Suomessa säilyy! Kind of went to a dark place there for a second. Anyway, back now. So let's continue with this guy. All right. So we got her down on the Empty Skull Ranch gun looking at table right here. So we're going to capitalize on this. Well, we still got the light of day behind us. As always, I reiterate that we have nothing but the best gunsmithing tools on premises. Anyhow, that being said, I'm going to stick this guy over here. So kind of lay these parts out as they're coming out. So here we have, trying to see if there's anything else that was kind of a standout thing that I wanted to point out on this. But look at this, look at that. Even this letter S on the stock. I don't know if you can really see that, but there is an S on there. And don't see the corresponding A to go with it, but that certainly is an S. There's an S right there too. And I knew that there was a purpose for numbers and letters on these stocks, but I don't want to feed any false information and dictate what I think it is that's in my head right now. So I definitely want to, I'll plug it in down at the bottom of the screen there if I think of it. So, but right here, so that is kind of neat. All these little dings, you know, like picture this being dragged about on the front lines and what that, no, I'm not going to go back down into a rabbit hole like that. That was scary. So anyway, here we go. We are going to start by taking this swivel off. We're not going to go crazy and take both of these off because stock is what it is, so I'm not going to take apart the stock. So we're going to remove first this guy right here. Comes off just as you would imagine it would, and just got to get into it there. Alrighty. Get this guy loosened up. Pull that guy out. Slide that. Now I am going to put this right here so it doesn't get lost. And stick the sling off to the side over there. So these barrel bands, anybody familiar with these older style Mosins have kind of an interesting barrel band system. So instead of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey on these guys, it is righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. That makes any sense. So I'm going to pretend like I'm tightening this thing down, but I'm actually loosening this thing up. So, and I'll show you in a second why that is the way it is. I also need a corresponding little screwdriver because they have these little tiny wood screws that go right into here. And after I do this video, I'm going to have to make sure that I give this thing a good wipey down because I want to keep it in decent shape, because this is, after all, a much rarer. I mean, I go a little bit crazy with the gun lube anyway, because I don't like rust. The rust monster can strike at any point, creep up when you're not looking. Anyway, starting to go into those dark places again. So, oh yeah, it's a little easier to do this once you pop the cleaning rod out of it. And as with all Mosins, we got a full length cleaning rod. But I'll show you what I kind of meant on these barrel bands. Notice how it's one piece and it's under spring tension, holding it open like that. So it's got this post right here that's got a bit of threaded section on it, and then it's got this slotted end. So as you operate that, so if you're going this way thinking you're going looser, you're actually tightening it up. This way, you're loosening it up. So kind of a neat system, you know, with these guys. They're stout barrel bands. I mean, they definitely get the job done. They have those indexing shoulders for where they fall on the barrel, and also I'll show you the foregrip, the hand grip. So I'm going to put those together. I'm going to take this guy out on this side. Again, act like I'm trying to reef it down, but I'm actually loosening it. Looses it. I'm having a hard time with words today. I'm not good with the words, bro. All right, so take out that little wood screw again. Put that up here. Not the best system for keeping those. That's why they ended up going back with those the little spring-loaded kind of clips there that kept these barrel bands back. So this hand guard is just affixed by two little wings on this side, two little wings on that side, and it's riveted in place. Rivet, rivet. So I'm going to put this right here in the same orientation it was on the rifle, and pull out this barrel band. Same play as the other one, just on a bigger scheme right there. So set that guy there, set that guy there, so the wood screw's inside of it so it doesn't get any ideas and jumping off the table. And we're going to slide this guy over. A lot of these rifles too, when you see them, they'll be missing that handguard. You know, that's and you'll just see the open top just like that. Kind of looks out of place for a Mosin, but that's another one of the things that excited me about this is that handguard was in place still. So there we are. There's the 1941 barrel, the puolistuslaitos tikkakoski mark with the T in the triangle. I don't know how well you can see it from that far, but that's and also it's got the little arrow right there. It's from what I gather, this is built on an Ishevsk receiver. So let's see if we have the corresponding markings for that. So let's get this highly calibrated screwdriver in here, this gunsmithing special. Throw that in there. There we go. Real nice. I noticed already an Ishevsk mark right on this guy. You'll notice the bow and arrow right there. Ishevsk used a lot of the bow and arrows, and the arrows in general were more of a, because the Tula star would have an arrow itself in the star. So sometimes the Tula stuff you'll see with a single arrow, whereas the Ishevsk will be the bow and arrow. Just got to pull the trigger back and slide this bolt out of there. I should have done that in the first place. Toss that guy right there. Taking those bolts apart can be a pain in the you-know-what, but I have had to do it before. I use the indexing tool to set the to make sure that that firing pin is striking deep enough, and I don't like taking those apart though, because it's a lot of heartache. If you don't have to take them apart, I don't suggest taking them apart. And don't drop your screwdriver. It's not a good look. So pull this guy out of here, and that internal magazine and trigger guard should pop right out. So let's take a look at this guy before we pop that out of there, just to got that little clip right there to hold this all together. But nothing fancy, you know, just a regular follower in there. Some of these had enhanced followers. They were replaced by us fins, you know, whenever necessary, but that's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Single stack 76254R. So let's pull that out of here. Keep that with the magazine and trigger guard. So let's slide the main event on out of there. There's the stock. And here is, notice the number right there on the barrel. All these other little stray numbers all up and down the barrel. I gotta look up and see what all those little stray numbers mean. But my suspect is correct, it looks like. I see an Izzy bow and arrow right there. I don't know how well you guys at home can see that. Faint, very faint. These receivers were made by a lot of different sources. In the, I mean, there was, in the early days, they had a French manufacturer, Châtellerault, that made a bunch of these. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Châtellerault made a bunch of these receivers for these Mosins. And obviously, Ishevsk and Tula. But whereas this one's got the bow and arrow, it's an Ishevsk receiver. And but I know that Remington and I believe Westinghouse made a bunch of these as well on stateside for these rifles. They got a lot of help kind of producing these rifles, and I could spend a whole video kind of talking about the differences in the early days and the production and all that on these guys, but I'm not going to bore you guys to death. We got to still get to a little bit of a shooting portion of this video, so I'm going to move along with the reassemble, kind of the same as the disassembly. You can definitely note that this is a this trigger had some reworking done to it, because it is much smoother than the Russian counterpart. I mean, that sear, I wish you guys at home could feel this, but that sear is smooth like butter. So I'm going to slide this guy back in there. Wish I had some weasel piss with me out here. I would grease up this barrel right now. I hate putting these things back together with skin juice all over them, because it's once again the rust monster. So pop that guy in here like so. Throw the trigger through there. Toss that down there. Kind of like holding it right here as I'm reassembling. That way I can go even on the front and the back, so I don't start cross-threading anything or making things get out of whack or misaligned. But see how nicely that goes in when you hold them like that. There's also little tricks here and there for how to, I don't know where they are. I gotta locate them, but I have a bunch of the Russian style stripper clips for these rifles. And there's a little trick to using those as well, because that's about as inconvenient as a you know, heart attack trying to use the Russian style clips. But if you take them, try to figure out if I can show you a way to do it without having the actual clip right here. And in that case, the word clip is still acceptable. I know clip normally corresponds with a garand, because they're literally held captive in a clip that goes inside the rifle, but clip is acceptable for these ones as well. And I could feel as that barrel went in there that it's not making, let me see if I can I want to get a piece of that in there, but I can slide this pretty freely. Get on out of there. Don't want it to make a home in there, but I can slide that freely underneath there throughout the bedding of this. So it is a pretty well floated barrel inside of there. So if I had $1 on me, I don't even have $1, but it is a little leaf. But you can see it's a happy barrel if it's floated. It stays harmonious. But with ease, this leaf can travel underneath that barrel throughout the length of this stock. You notice that the leaf didn't rip, fed right underneath there, and up until the very end, where there's a slight little mate right there, all through here, that stalk doesn't come in contact with it at all. Just one of the little improvements that the Finn Mosins will have. And I'm sure there's some Russian ones out there that have that feature as well, but I can't help but make a shameless plug for dear old Finland when I can. So slide this guy back on like that, get it on deck, and then throw this guy like that. Slide them fingers right underneath it. I like to give it a quick little lefty tighty. Geez, I hear the chickens in there squabbling. I wonder what's going on. They're laying, you know, they're making all kinds of cluckabouts and all that while they've been passing a lot of eggs. So this guy is a little, you know what? I went the wrong way with that guy. I got deep into thought about eggs, and so we gotta go lefty loosey on this guy, lefty tighty on this guy. There we go. Your mind is so ingrained to go one way to tighten something when you're thinking about it in your head. So lefty tighty, just on these barrel bands. Try not to carry over that philosophy to other things. So throw that in there. That hole looks a little spooky, but very delicately so we don't lose it down this little crack. That would be my luck. I'd say, God blessed. So put it right in there, not too tight, because this guy has seen a lot of action. I don't want to exacerbate that hole. Throw this guy right here. Do the same kind of philosophy right there. Tighten it right up. And snugged up pretty good. We don't want it to be overly snug because we were just talking about barrel harmonics and all that, so you don't want to really pinch the living snot out of that barrel. So that's just enough to hold. Make sure those fingers and the handguard are in there. And put that little wood screw in there. Later on, like I said, this little issue was dealt with. So they no longer had these little tiny screws there that were easy to lose, and those holes were easy to wear out. And of course, throw this guy back in there. Give her a cuddle. And here we are, feeling like it's in place. Can't forget to get that sling, make sure that that is lined up correctly. And undo using this wee little guy right here. I like these. I kind of like these sling swivels as opposed to the dog collar ones myself. It just seems to make sense. You know, it's not a bulky leather collar on there. It's feels like a good fit. Use this bigger blade so it doesn't make those. Looks like it had been tightened with a small screwdriver once or twice. There we go. Put that right there. Slide the bolt back in, and she is ready for action. Owie! I gotta add, this is very smooth bolt. Very smooth. Throw one of these guys in there. Point it in a safe direction, but I'll just show how effortless this particular rifle is. For a Mosin, that is damn good. because I know some of these, like my M39, you got to beat that thing down and then slap it back up. But this guy, right and ready. I enjoy this rifle. It's just a good feeling rifle. So definitely, if I was fighting the good fight during the continuation war and I didn't have my hands on an M39, but I was handed this guy, felt like that butt plate needed a little bit of tightening. And as soon as I can get that in there, I will. But I would definitely not be upset. I wouldn't be mad at this guy. This would be a good weapon to carry. Some of these, quickly before we go to the shooting part, one of the improvements on this was flattened in the back and a plate added to it so that it could that it had a little bit of a tighter V on it. And but the plate was either joined with two little screws going in this way or two little screws going from top to bottom. But that was one of the little improvements, whereas this is just straight old style sight. But there's that 1941 on the barrel. So let's give it a little bit of a shoot around, shall we? All right, guys, let's see how this guy shoots. Gonna top her off. Had to give it a safety shot just to make sure everything was in proper working order. Now let's size up some of these targets. Shouldn't be too hard to hit as they're not that far away. Nice smooth action in this guy. We got a squatter. Getting kind of dark, so these targets are a little bit harder to acquire, but that's no kind of excuse. The enemy's not always going to be in broad daylight. Got the one on the barrel. Now let's go for that lonely orange one that we saw the spark in the back of the backstop. See if that laying down one has any oomph left to it. No, not much. Smooth action on this guy.